Well, good morning and welcome to StocktonCon on day number 2. We're going to get started here with a couple pretty good actresses to my right. Kathy Garver right here of Family Affair. Played Sissy Davis is her main role, but has done a lot of other things. And then Tracey Gold from Growing Pains fame and Carol Seaver. And both were childhood actors. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, talk about their careers, talk about what they're doing now. And I guess we can open it up with being both childhood actors. What did you learn as childhood actors and kind of give off to the next generation? Obviously, Kathy, you have a book out in regards to that, but Tracey maybe also chat in that regard of being a childhood actor, and then the struggles of fame after that, of being on 2 iconic television shows.
You want to go first? Whatever.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, what did I learn? To hit my marks and to memorize my lines. Those were 2 very important things. I remember when I was a child and I had a part on The Millionaire. Not the new millionaire that we see today, so you answer the questions and get $1 million. But this was more John Beresford Tipton. You do something and you are rewarded with this $1 million. So I was to play the little girl on the show, and so I memorized all my lines and I just had everything down. I was maybe 10 at that time. So I went to the set already. The only problem is I didn't memorize any of my cues. So I never knew when to come in. So I thought, oh no, when's that line? When's that line? Well, this was not a good thing. So they had the script supervisor come over and then we went over the lines. But that was a very embarrassing moment for a 10-year-old, and I've known my lines plus other people's lines ever since. So that was a very important thing for me to learn.
Well, for me, I started acting when I was 4 in New York. And I started with print work and then did commercials. And when we moved to California, my first role in doing a movie or anything like that was in the miniseries Roots. So I got my feet in the door into a pretty big project right away. For me, being a child actress, I think when you're a child actress, there are different rules for a kid actor and an adult actor. And I took it very seriously, and my mom always instilled in me that, how to be professional and know your lines, and also that if the adults were kind of goofing off, it didn't mean that as a child you could join in on that you had to be, still be professional and respectful and not goof off. So I was kind of serious, I took it really seriously. And, as a child actor, you also have to do school, So school doesn't just go away because you're on a set. So it's required that a child actor has 3 hours a day of school. I remember when we were doing Growing Pains, and I turned 18, and I graduated high school, and I went, wait a minute, when there's a break, you actually can just go relax in your dressing room. For me, I'd never been able to do that growing up. So I was like, wow, the adult actors have it way easier than the kid actors. But I had a good experience, and I was lucky, and I had good parents, so that's very helpful.
And I think, Tracey, your sister Missy was on Benson
Yes.
Before, and really was on a show in a family environment of that before. And did she kind of give you some tips, even though she was the younger sister telling the older sister?
Not really, because we were so close, and I was acting while she did Benson, so I was always continually on a set. I just wasn't attached to a series that you could really identify me. And when I was always on the set of Benson with Missy and hanging out, and it was someplace I'd go after school, so I kind of knew what to expect, and I was so excited because I thought Benson seemed like such a fun thing to do.
And that kind of, that TV family that you got, close to, because, you do it year after year, and you're there, 16, 18 hours a day. Talk about how that, dynamic kind of works of being on a series for a few years.
Well, and I think Kathy can relate to this, is that when your kid's on a set and you're in the spotlight and you're going through this experience together, it really is a bonding experience. you know, nobody else knows what it's like, and you share that similarity. And at least for us in my show, you know, the 3 kid actors and Joanna and Alan, you know, we all like included our families in it. So if there was Halloween, they come to our Halloween parties, and you know, we would always hang out with each other, and the siblings would come to the set and hang out. And it was like a family. I mean, it sounds cliche, but it really was, and it continued throughout the years.
We had a different kind of dynamic on our show because, first of all, I was already 18, and so I didn't have to go to school.
Oh.
So I was already happy. I know. And the kids were very young. Buffy and Jody. Jody started when he was just 6, and then Anissa Jones Buffy started. She was a couple years older, and you know, we worked from like 6. I was always there first, 6:30 a.m. to like 6:30 at night. And so when you're with people that long, you know, you want to kind of go back to your own family, which I did. And so Brian had his own family, Keith, and Sebastian Cabot, who played Mr. French, had his own family. Everyone was very attached to their own family, and there was really a lovely feeling between us all. So I think that really united us. And so that was, we were happy to go home and see our own families.
And I think, Tracey, when I was researching you for this panel discussion, one thing I saw was an article about when you guys did the Growing Pains movies, and you were able to bring your kids on set, and kind of that different dynamic of.
Yeah, I mean, it was full circle. We did 2 reunion movies, and you know, we would bring our kids to the set, and you know, by that point, Alan had another son, and brought him, and you know, our lives had changed so much, and we were. I remember when we did the reunion movie, we were the same age as Joanna was when she was cast in Growing Pains. She was young to play her mom, but it was kind of surreal.
And Kathy, you know, looking at your career, I mean, one of your mentors, I read somewhere, was the director Edmund Hartman.
Ah, yes, Edmund Hartman was wonderful. What was good about, I think, our television series, it was one of the first, it had a lot of firsts. And this began in 1966. So it was one of the very first shows in color. It was one of the first kind of shows to address a kind of a dysfunctional family, or a different kind of family that didn't have a mom and a dad and a couple kids. It was an uncle who was not married, and who, well, it was never shown whether he adopted us or not, but had this kind of descent, and then what, you know, was he going to do with these kids? So it also came from very much of a movie background. And so Ed Hartman had done like Abbott and Costello films, and our director, Charlie Barton, a little leprechaun, wonderful man, did Abbott and Costello films as well, directing them. And Ed Hartman wrote them, and wrote a lot of things for Bob Hope, Lemon Drop, and different things like that. So it, and we shot on film, which I think makes a big difference when you're having tape or HD now. It has a much harder edge. It gives it a different kind of reality. Whereas when you have film, it's nicer, and it's smoother, and it's warmer. And our show, talk about warm. Very, you know, our show was very comfortable, like eating a piece of cake. It was very comforting, very much of a comforting show. But Ed Hartman, who was the producer and writer on the show and cast me, also had a couple of acting tips, like when you're acting on film, you look in someone's eyes. He says the soul comes through your eyes, and this is the way that you were communicating. The camera picks that up. That was one of his things. And he also suggested that I sign up for a Book of the Month Club, and that was also when Watson and Crick just came out with the discovery of DNA. Now, we watch any show today, and we know we can catch the killer and catch anybody by just getting a sample of their water bottle from which they just took a sip. Aha! Kathy was seen at a panel at Stockton Comic-Con. But in those days, this was something really interesting, that they discovered the double helix, which was the name of their book, and they discovered the structure of DNA. So Edmund Hartman was a guide for me, not only in acting, but also in trying to to train a mind, that there are other things beyond just acting.
And one thing you mentioned there was, the dynamic of a single parent family. And obviously with Growing Pains, it was more of kind of a nuclear family in that regard. But I wonder if the childhood actors, both of you were, in your teens when you were doing it, did you suggest storylines that maybe were more, situated to teens of that era, or?
I don't think I think the only agenda I pushed was to make Carol Seaver not such a nerd. When I got the show, the concept of, the quintessential kind of like school, bookworm kind of girl is we wear glasses and dress all nerdy, and I'm like, well, why can't I be cool and smart at the same time? And so they sort of adjusted Carol's character to be, she became the homecoming queen, and things kind of felt more like some fun things. So I think that's the only direction, not specific storylines, just like, let's make Carol cool and like, dress cuter and stuff like that.
Yeah, my only suggestions, and these were many times before I got shut down, was fashion ideas, and this is when everyone was wearing miniskirts. And oh my God, no, you can't wear a miniskirt. And actually Don Featherson, who was the producer of our show, was pretty right in this. He was also the producer of My Three Sons and well, Liberace doesn't really count in here. But he wanted the shows, he already had the vision to put these shows out as being classic. So you look at Family Affair today, which is still on MeTV and Decades and Hulu and DVD, and you could be walking into the way that the living room is and the decor is what that looks like today. The fashions that were simple and that unfortunately sissies came right up, to her in the middle of her knee, except for the last year when I got a little bit more greens. But he was right, and the storylines were very classic because they had a traditional arc. You start out with this problem, you go through the machinations of solving it, you reach you solve it, and then the denouement. So it was a classic storyline. It was told in a classic place, in a classic fashion, and so it's still around like we are.
And I think, when I was talking to Tracey earlier this weekend about, being on a panel with you, Kathy, I mean, she had a great story in regards to actually seeing you, on television and, the Mrs. Beasley doll and everything else.
Yeah, well, I did, and I've been fangirling all weekend to Kathy because I grew up, I was little. This was back in New York when I watched Family Affair, and so it was, I loved it, and Mrs. Beasley and Buffy and Jodie and Sissy and like the whole thing. I was like kind of obsessed with it. And I haven't even told you this. My first kitten was called Buffy.
Oh, is that right?
My first cat, yeah, that I love so much. So, yeah.
And we had a dog named Buffy.
Now, how has sitcoms kind of changed from the times you worked on them to nowadays? Do you see some bits and pieces of, hey, you know what, we still do it that way, whether it's the lighting, whether it's the way, obviously you talk to other actors, how they cast those type of family type shows. Has it changed more? I mean, obviously some of the storylines, like, A Married with Children is completely different than both of the shows that you were on or Roseanne, but is the way the show was made or the characters built, is it different? Or is it similar?
Well, for me, my show was shot differently than Kathy's show. Mine had 4 cameras in front of an audience. And that's a traditional sitcom, format. And that still applies today. And you can go and sit in an audience and watch Big Bang Theory or, a lot of different shows. And so that is very similar, that format, that vibe, that kind of almost canned laughter kind of feel. But I think that the structure of the traditional family, like Growing Pains, I don't think that's as prevalent in television nowadays. And I think that's what I hear so often from people who say they don't do it like they used to. And I think that, the traditional, the kids in the high school, and, and then the parents, like all, loving, and, you learn a lesson at the end. I think they've shifted away from that. And 1992, when Growing Pains ended, that's when they were bringing in the era of Roseanne. And it was a very different feel than our show. It was and Roseanne's a great show, but it was just edgier and different, and that's what the audience was asking for at that time, and more than we delivered in that area.
Yes, I think that it's definitely changed, and as I alluded to, I mean, ours was on film, which was very nice. It's more expensive and it's softer, and now so many things are just done on tape, and they can they have 3 cameras, and we finally in our last year did go to 2 cameras instead of the standard, you know, they take the master shot, maybe a 2-shot, and then close-ups, which was easy to do. And what's also obviously changed is the content, which I really find personally abhorrent. I don't like to watch people insulting each other. I don't think that is called for. I think it makes people angry. And you can take comedy so far, and this is a sitcom. Our show is based on the situation of comedy. It was not based on one-liners or jokes or putting people down. That was antithetical to what we were doing. We were telling a story. And I think what is lacking in many of, are you on your soapbox, Kathy? I was just wondering. No, you're not. I also do a lot of voiceover, so I talk to myself. You have to be a little schizophrenic too. No, you don't. Yes, you do. No, I don't. But that happens in voiceovers, also in real life. There was a real story, and I think that's what's missing is storytelling, and that is what really makes our culture. We are passing our story to each other, and if you don't have a story to pass, you have just feelings and emotions and whatever you feel like at the moment. I'm angry. Oh, don't hurt my feelings. And is that really true? And I admired our show because it told the story, and yeah, maybe it was a little fantasy. Okay, I think that's something fine to look up to. I have to admit that this morning getting ready, I was watching the live-action Cinderella, which was really lovely, and that is in our myth, and this is in part of our culture. And if we take our culture away, then what do we have? We don't have anything. So I think that there are a couple of shows that have kind of stayed in that particular genre, which was like The Middle, which is still going on, and Last Man Standing. And now, because there's Netflix and Hulu and Paramount and Apple and Amazon and all these places, and YouTube broadcasting, and so many places where you can put content, I think that those needs will be fed for those audiences. And those shows that will succeed will be based on what people, a particular audience wants. And that was a way too long answer to your question.
No, that's perfect. And it kind of leads into, another question I had in regards to, Tracey, you did a couple reality shows, one being at a stay-at-home moms, which I thought was kind of a neat kind of concept.
Oh, that was Soccer Mom. Yeah, I hosted that show. And that was taking moms who have been at home, left their careers, and they get an opportunity to see if they want to go back into the workforce. And I was a host of that show, but the show that I'm really proud of that I did was the one that I created, and that was for Lifetime, and it was helping women with eating disorders. And we helped 10 women over an 8-episode run, and we did it in real time. It took a year to film. It was my concept. I sold it and hired all the people. Fortunately, we became the victims of network change, heads of network change. But it's something that I was really proud of, and that we saved lives doing. So.
Well, were there some difficulties in regards to being the producer and the creator of the show?
It was great. It was wonderful. I've dipped my toe a little bit into the reality world, but only in things that I felt I would represent me and I would feel, comfortable doing. And, as an actor, you have to ever evolve because the industry is always evolving, and you have to be flexible if you want to work, And so that's what I've tried to do for my career.
Have you either of you been that Hollywood parent of trying to get your kids involved, or were you both sort of, hey, let them do it if they're interested? We were both in show business. If they're interested, if they're interested in soccer, let them be the next professional soccer.
My view of being a child actor is that you're a child doing an adult job. and that it's just a fact. And that's a lot of responsibility, and that's a lot. And I think that I'm never one to stand in front of my children's dreams. So if they had such a passion, desire, and wanted to, I don't think I would have stood in their way. Thank God they didn't want to. I had a funny story. You know, my dad is an agent, and my sister is also. And they called and they said, listen, they're casting School of Rock, and it wasn't the movie, it was the TV series. And they're looking for musicians, and my son is a drummer. And I asked him, they're like, but Aiden want to audition. I'm like, oh God. I'm like, I'll ask him, but I don't think so. He's like, yes, that'd be great. And so I put him on tape the way they do it now. We sent the tape in. And I would say for the next week, every day he'd come home from school going, so have we heard? Have we heard? And then finally I'm like, Aiden, I mean, this was a long shot. And I'm like, I don't think it's going to go your way. He's like, oh man, I really thought I had it. And he just didn't get the concept that it's a lot harder to get a job than just putting yourself on tape. So I'm just grateful that it hasn't been a passion of theirs, because I wouldn't have stood in their way. But I do think it's a difficult job, and I think it's a trade-off with a real childhood in a lot of ways.
Well, I have just one son, as opposed to Tracy's 4. So I only had one thing to think about with that. And my son, who is now 26, is still in the basement, and he didn't leave home and fly the nest, but he invited people to come in. So he's living with his girlfriend in the basement now, and they've been there for like 3 years. But when he was a baby, I thought, oh, what is that the cutest child you have ever seen in your life? I mean, is he adorable? Oh, look at the way he does that. I mean, like every parent, they think that their child is just the cutest thing in the world. So, of course, he was doing printouts when he was 6 months old, and he had nothing to say about it. And then as he got older, he did more print ads. We were living in San Francisco close, so it wasn't as, dynamic as Los Angeles, had so many other things to do. But then he got older and he did some parts on Don Johnson was shooting his movie up there, I don't remember the name of it right now. Anyway, he got a part on that. He became SAG, Screen Actors Guild. He joined after. And then when he was 12, he says, I don't want to do this anymore. But honey, you're so adorable and you're so good. Mom, I don't want to do this. Okay. So that was the end of his career. So he is in the basement as an entrepreneur with a dog business, a VIP pooch, and they're $1 billion business, not for him, but in the United States, very big business. So no, and I wrote a book called Ex-Child Stars, this is my 3rd book, Ex-Child Stars, Where Are They Now? And there are many stories of successes and failures and kind of ins and outs and how to prevent some of the things that happen to child stars, as Tracy has said, are put into an adult world before they're really ready.
And Kathy, that book, about former childhood stars, it was I would think it would be easier for that childhood star to relate to you because you've been through it. I mean, I got to think both you and Tracey have had that, conversation with other childhood actors, whether during, before, or one's just coming up. So.
Yeah, I started acting when I was 7 professionally, and I was a Medlin Kitty, and that was at the Shirley Temple. She was discovered as a Medlin Kitty. I'm not as old as Shirley Temple was, however, when she was at Medlin Studios, even so. But yeah, so I went through all of that, and I was a freelance child actor, so did a lot of movies and TV guest spots and as well as radio. So covered that gamut. But it was easier to write the book because on many, I didn't need to do a lot of research. I knew them. And we'd be having a glass of wine or this or that, and I'd say, well, what did you think about that? And I got, the truth, I said, do you mind if I put this? Oh, no, that's fine. Tracey's even in the book.
No, that's, and I guess, one other thing I was looking at your career, you talked about, you being 7 years old, and having Moses say hello to you, that of course being Charles Heston, and even as a 7-year-old, you continued to talk with him through, his entire life, which I thought was a really interesting dynamic of him being a very famous movie star even at that point, and a 7-year-old, and you guys just continued to be in touch.
Right. Well, I did start dating a good friend of his, and that helped continue our relationship. But he really was a wonderful person. And yes, one of my very first movies was The Ten Commandments, and not the silent version. Again, I always have to keep these dates straight, but it's difficult, is it not, when you, it's hard to lie about your age when you see, you can't when you're on film. And that one in that IMDb, try and change your age on that, there's no way. That's the International Movie Database that lists all the actors and movies. So I was just hired as an extra on Ten Commandments, and all of a sudden I heard this great big voice boom out, "Don't let that little girl's face get in the camera." And I said, who is that? Is that God? Because it was coming from above. And I said, did I do something wrong? Well, it happened, it was Cecil B. DeMille, who is the director of that movie, and he was sitting on this big crane getting an overview of the scene. So the crane descended, I went over, I talked to him, and then he wrote these scenes with me, and Charlton Heston. He liked to add humanity into these great big epics. So we had the scene, and Charlton Heston and I became friends, and there's a long story, and I'm not going to tell you this long story. Another time, it's actually in my second book, which is Surviving Sissy, My Family Affair of Life in Hollywood, and I relate that story. But he was very kind, and we'd go up to his place on Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles, and he was a wonderful tennis player. My friend Michael Dante, whom I was dating, was a good tennis player, so that was fine. Then I had another good friend James Doolittle, and we had produced plays together, and there was a theater named after him, and he took Charlton Heston over to China and directed him in one of the first plays that was ever done in China, which was The King Mutiny. So that kind of kindled our relationship. And then, unfortunately, he had Alzheimer's disease. He was still, vibrant. I sent him some pictures, and I said, would you mind just signing these, for me? He signed more, sent it back with a lovely letter. So sometimes you get these wonderful people in your life. Well, every day I get great people in my life. I think it's every person you meet, to me, is like special with their own kind of thing. So even Charlton Heston was known globally. I now know all of you people, which is significant in my life as well. God, she does go on.
Well, we'll open up to any questions. Any questions in the audience right now? Don't be shy.
Robbie, I'm sure you have a question, don't you?
You want any breakfast catered now?
Yes.
What would be one of your most memorable moments being on set?
I worked with Betty Davis. That was pretty insane. And, she was very, she was kind of scary. And I wasn't the experienced Charlton Heston, but she, very nice, but like she would say, hello, Miss Gold, and very formal. And so I think even at that age, I was aware that was pretty special. It's like Hollywood royalty. So that was pretty cool.
I did a radio show with Betty Davis, and it's called Whispering Streets, and I was 11, I think. And so my agent said, oh, you're going to do Whispering Streets with Betty Davis. Oh, wow, was that the most exciting thing? So we got all dressed up. I don't know why we're getting dressed up to do a radio show, but I had a new little person. We go, and we're almost late. It's at CBS, where they have the big radio stations and studios. So we go in, and I said, oh, is Miss Davis there yet? Well, no. He said, well, I know we're a little late. She says, well, Miss Davis won't be here. I said, why is that? She said, oh, well, she does her part in New York, and we do your parts here. And so I never did meet her. And so I do have us on tape, however.
We played witches. It was called The Dark Secrets of Harvest Home, and I was like the young witch, and she was like the head kind of, evil witch of the coven, basically. And like in a town, like in Ohio or something.
Was that an episode?
It was a movie. It was a movie of the week.
Movie.
It was a TV movie of the week in the 70s.
Oh, yeah. Have you seen it lately?
No,
That would be interesting
Would
to
be
look
fun,
at,
I
yeah. Yeah, for sure.
How hard is it to go from sitcom television or doing television, doing, say, a movie of the week or that sort of thing?
When I got growing pains, all my experience was doing movies of the weeks. Like, and I also did a feature called Shoot the Moon. And I was always the kid that they would hire because I could cry on cue. I could cry really easily. And I was always like the one that was like abandoned, kind of thing. The kid, like, you know, my wardrobe would be like, go roll around in the dirt. You know, I was the orphan. I played Marilyn Monroe as a little girl, Norma Jean. So I always did really dramatic things. So when I got growing pains, I actually didn't get growing pains the first time around. There was a pilot that was shot. I auditioned for it, I didn't get it. There was a pilot that was shot, and they recast the original Carol Seaver because she didn't test like she, they test all the characters, and she didn't test like she fit in with the family. So then they called me back to re-audition me. And I think it was because my natural instincts weren't to be super big and broad and, you know, do the comedy's just very, very different. So the director really worked with me so that I could kind of like have an ear for the comedy and be a little bit bigger and bolder. And I got it. And so I was sort of training on the job to do a sitcom, which was, it kind of went against my natural instincts as an actress. But I adjusted. So,
And you adjusted well.
Carol.
And I mean, I think the one, you know, episode I remember growing up on Growing Pains is when, you know, they did the very special episodes.
Yeah, there was always a very special episode, and my character was dating Matthew Perry, and he died in a drunk driving accident. So that was our special episode. When I think I did one for 19, and we did one on cocaine. And I think we did, I don't remember what Jeremy's was, but each kid would get kind of a very special episode. And in that one, I got to show my dramatic kind of acting chops. And because I had to break down and cry on, you know, in front of the audience and everything. And it was one of my better episodes, I believe. It was really, it played to my strengths.
No, I mean, I remember, you know, and the feedback, you know, when I was reading, you know, about the feedback, you guys got letters both ways, both how could you do this on television, and oh, by the way, this is great that you...
I never heard any negative feedback about it, so that's news to me. But I heard it got good feedback, so.
No, yeah, absolutely. Any final questions for our guests? Well, let's thank... go ahead.
So you and Kirk Cameron on stage were kind of sibling rivalries, kind of. Off stage, you kind of have your hands around his neck, or were you guys?
No, we were close. We were friends. I mean, we would drive into work together, and we got along really well. We lived in the same area. He had 3 sisters. I had 4 sisters. The families got along. You know, he went through a little bit of a metamorphosis during the show, and things changed a little bit. But in the beginning, we got along very well. So no, it wasn't like Carol Seaver and
I mean, I still loved each other on the show, but
yeah. But he would tease me like Mike would tease me. I was very easy to tease on the set because I was gullible and I kind of naive and I kind of believed anything anybody would say. So yeah, I was one to have a good time with.
Well, both our actresses up here are up on the second deck. Obviously, Kathy has a few books she is selling up there about her career and also cookbook and also the childhood stars. And Tracey's up there as well. You can get a picture, get an autograph, and talk to them as well. So thank you for coming, and hopefully you enjoy the rest of StocktonCon.
Thank you. Thank you,
so much,
Neil.
guys. Thank you.
yeah.